rational managers in our developed world wouldn't really consider their practices management in some cases, but they're much better managers. So I'm like, best practices win.
Right.
Best practices win.
I became interested in that and got my master's in anthropology. With my interest was in hunter gatherers, obviously, or I guess not obviously to everyone, but these guys already knew that. And I started my PhD, but I couldn't execute on my field work because of the pandemic. So I have partial education on that account. Didn't finish that degree, but yeah, that's kind of the synopsis. But actually, it's fun. It's interesting that I went right to the institutional crap because most of the education that I actually value is like more self-directed, like podcasts, listening to lots of podcasts and reading whatever I want to read. That's not necessarily, a curriculum set by somebody else.
Yeah.
Thanks, Josh. We got to meet yesterday. I'm Coach Bam.
Yeah, you and I got to talk yesterday.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. And then, of course, we got the one and only Coach Gill.
the
one and only.
The knucklehead out of the bunch.
Yeah.
Right? So we just gonna. You want to start, or how do you want to do it?
We're rolling right now.
Okay.
We're recording.
So Eyla, we started this podcast. It's the Coach Gill and Bam podcast to celebrate our coaches and to celebrate what I call nature's teachers around the world, which you are. You are a teacher of nature, and I don't know how you stumbled upon us, but I'm so glad we stumbled upon you because your posts are fascinating. So what I like to do, because I'm a circular thinker, I got an ADD and all the classic problems with bullet points and table of contents. I like to have just a stream thought process. And whatever comes up in your mind and my mind and Bam's mind and Coach Josh's mind, we just let it flow. So my first question to you is, tell us about exactly what you're doing with birth in children and how you got into it.
Okay. Hi everyone. I'm Eyla, and like Coach Gill said, I work in birth. I call myself a holistic birth guide. Hey, are you guys there?
Oh. Yeah. We can see you.
A holistic birth guide. So I guide couples or individuals from the beginning to the end, so to speak. So if they're planning to get pregnant, they want to conceive, and they want to start preparing their body, preparing their mind, I work with them on that. If they find me when they're already pregnant, I guide them through that process. It's really heavy based in education. So trying to gauge what their goals are and how they would like things to unfold, I can guide them that way. Some people find me when they're about to give birth and they just need a coach to get them through this physical athletic event, which is what birth is. It's a huge athletic event. So sometimes I come in for that. And then sometimes I come in afterwards. They have this new baby and they need some guidance with breastfeeding, best practices in parenting, learning how to fine tune their instincts and their intuition, which can sometimes get very lost and muddled along the way. So yeah, it's kind of I call it holistic because it's full spectrum. It's in every area, right? And I got into this work because I actually studied cultural anthropology in my undergrad and photography. And so out of college, I started doing birth photography. So I was holding space. I was in this space as an observer, as a witness in birth. And then I started seeing that my strengths and my skills were much more in the support aspect and in the education aspect of the whole process. So that's how I became a certified certified doula, which is a birth coach. and I work with placentas as well, but that's a whole other conversation.
Well, I got a million questions about that, but okay. So a couple of things you said, and Josh, since y'all have a lot in common, if you just want to kind of get in there, you can. Holding space. The concept of holding space. What did you mean by that when you just use those terms?
So holding space looks different for everyone. And I think anyone who feels that they're empathetic or that they're what's called an empath, right?
Mm-hmm.
They can sort of feel what's going on with someone else. They can hold space, right? Sometimes you just need someone to sit there with you while you have an experience. You don't need any verbiage. You don't need anything physical. You just need someone to sit in that space so that you can move through it. Sometimes you do need physical support when you're going through an event, so you can hold space physically for someone. And sometimes you do need that verbal support. So through verbal coaching, affirmations, hypnosis, you can hold space in that way.
Wow.
Sometimes people call me and they just want to have a phone conversation, right? A phone call, right? A client of mine said, I just need to talk for 30 minutes about what's going on with my doctor. And I'll listen for 30 minutes. So that's a form of holding space for someone. And we do it all the time, human to human. Just looks a little bit different in this context with birth.
Yeah, I think we do that well, guys, don't we? I think our team is from around the world, and they all found Goata, and they came to Goata to heal their bodies, and so we do that easy because everybody came to Goata for the same reason, to heal their bodies and to feel better and to move through space in this anti-fragile, beautiful place. So here's another question for you. Do you actually deliver the child inside a home?
So a midwife would be the one who does the home birth, the medical portion of this. I'm a doula, so I'm a physical and emotional coach through the process. I don't diagnose anything. I don't take blood pressure. I don't do vaginal exams. That would be a midwife.
Gotcha. All right, now let's go the definition of doula one more time. Explain to us what it is, and then how do you get certified in it, and who are where's the originality of this doula modality from?
I don't even like the word. I think it's like a silly word, but in ancient Greek, it means slave or servant. And so traditionally, throughout history, women served this role throughout. There was always a birth attendant, right? There was always someone who was getting the wet rags, helping the midwife, doing the massage, getting the oils, the hot compresses, that kind of thing. So that's now evolved into this more modern day doula, which is a physical and emotional support person. So if a couple is planning a birth at a hospital, I support them through that experience. If they're planning a birth at home, I support them through that experience. So we work together throughout the pregnancy. We meet for a few sessions. We set goals. We figure out how we're going to reach those goals. And then when they go into labor, I go to their home. We work through that until the midwife arrives. And then we work together postpartum. So I guide them through that whole postpartum, post-birth period. I always say, don't go to Google for information. Don't go to Facebook groups for information. It's typically like the blind leading the blind. So this role is very important for women and couples and families, just to have someone who's educated in this aspect that's going to give them non-judgmental support. And I became certified through the Doulas, excuse me, the Doulas of North America. It's an international organization. I did that about 7 years ago, and there's many organizations that you can certify with. Now there's definitely a lot. Back then there were less, but there's definitely a lot now.
Yeah, the future is coaching in all aspects. As the technology, the robotics starts to do most of the easy stuff, we're going to go back to the original concept of everybody has to coach everybody, and everybody has to be a part of the tribe or the neighborhood. Josh, I'm sure you got about 1 million questions, huh?
Well, I was just gonna say that I think there are some like interesting parallels. I was just thinking about how we're kind of like movement doulas. You know, inside of every human being, there's this little Goata baby, but it's trapped inside this horrible womb of like emotional wounds and bad trainers who, you know, get people cast in their bodies and imprisoned in their soft tissue and hard tissue. And we, you know, we cue them, we give them the, you know, like you're talking about, coach them, give them the verbal affirmation to empower them. And we want them to own their own process. We want to elicit a response where they're exploring their own body, and we're kind of guiding them through it, because there's deprogramming of, you know, their perceptions and their feelings that have gotten them to a erect state in their movement. But yeah, we're trying to coax that Goata baby out, and sort of, yeah, it's kind of like a birth process. It's definitely labor.
Wow, that's really powerful.
Yeah, he's the smart
and
one. He's the smart one.
Well educated.
I like metaphors, or, you know, comparisons like that.
Right.
I think they're huge. Like, it says more than, you know, like there's more than meets the eye. Like, there's more than meets the ear with a metaphor. I do that a lot. But that, I had a question about you were saying about trying to, you were talking about people's instincts, and I was wondering if you find that in hypnosis. So hypnosis is a trance state, and it's putting people, I guess, in touch with their subconscious. I think that's a fair way to describe it. And you mentioned instincts earlier, so I was wondering, like, how do you find that, like, hypnosis or just the overall process does put people in touch with their instincts? Do you think those instincts and impulses are still strong in the human being, or you really have to break away these layers and things? Because like, I've never really liked the idea, you know, like Freud is like, there are these dark subconscious, the id or whatever, you know, the animal inside you. I'm like, and that these urges are like repressed, and that's what drives people into these irrational behaviors. But to me, the pathology is the rationalization, the intellect. That's what's programmable. Your subconscious is true. That's the wellspring of, you know, your innate instinctual mode of being. And when we talk about the Freud, the leaders really love, you know, people with power. Leaders is not a very good word. Powerful people who lust for resources and control over others, they really bought Freud's stuff, because they're like, oh yeah, you know, the masses are these animals. We gotta can these instincts and then drive them into productive endeavors. But to me, it's like, the subconscious is more true, and it's when they advertise, what they're doing is like they're playing on the subconscious. But, you know, you might think, oh yeah, I have this instinct, like I want this cigarette. I'm talking about cigarettes because Freud's nephew was Edward Bernays, the father of modern PR, and basically a demon in human flesh. But you know, they're taking your urge, and then they like trick you to not, you know, trust your instincts and rationalize your way out of it. Like, oh yeah, if I buy this thing, I'll actually feel better. And you just continually ignore and repress, you know, the instinct. So do you get them out? Like, do you find that those things are still alive in there once you scrape layers away, or am I totally way off? Or, you know,
No,
speak
like
on
this,
intuition and hypnosis and stuff, or subconscious.
Everything you're saying is like basically my 12-week class. So I'll try to answer that.
Okay.
So what you said of, okay, so playing on the subconscious desires, right? Like, these people in power, right? They're not leaders, but they're people in power. They have found this really effective way of playing on our subconscious desires while manipulating conscious fear.
Yeah.
So if you can imagine that, your subconscious wants and knows that it can have this empowered birth, for example. Birth is actually instinctual. It's actually easy. It's actually something that you could do without very little preparation.
In the bush.
You could just walk out into the bush and have a baby, because your body goes into autopilot. There's nothing that your mind knows to do that's going to make or break the situation. Like, you walk out your back door in labor, out into the woods, that baby's coming out, whether you do something or you don't do something. So what has happened, however, is that, through birth education, which is basically films and Hollywood, we have compounded this fear. You could look at it as you get this minor injury, right? Which is someone tells you a horrible birth story. So that's kind of your minor injury. And then it's compounded by horrible practices, like watching films where, childbirth is horrible, it's scary, it's dangerous. And all these films are made by men, by the way, who've never had babies. So that's also interesting. So yeah, when I work with these couples, I see that they have so many layers of fear. Oh, well, I heard this story, and someone told me that their sister, this happened to her, and we have to be in a hospital because we need to be safe, and we need to be hooked up to this because childbirth is so dangerous. And so to get to the root of that, I want to understand, okay, what was your birth story like? People say, I don't know. I don't know my birth story. I don't know anything about how I was born. I say, okay. So first we try to get the answers to that. And basically I spend time with them deconstructing the fear, proving the fear wrong, recoding, so to speak. And then once they've gotten to this state of understanding that their fears were really constructed by a lot of assumption and from other people's garbage, then we get to this kind of neutral state. And from there, we can work into manifesting their desires, right? What do you want this birth to look like? What do you want your parenting journey to look like? What are your goals? What's the time frame for these goals? Things like that. So yeah, it is, in some people it comes a little bit more easily than not. I also practice Reiki, which is a type of energy work. And so through that modality, sometimes things come up for people that they didn't know were there. And that is helpful information for me and for us as we're working through this fear.
We have a bunch of cool coaches and females too. But Coach Jameson from Tahoe went down to South America and did that ayahuasca is what it's called, ayahuasca ceremony, and he was saying that whole ceremony is about finding those demons, and trying to get them to a point where they're really just pseudo demons. They're not even real. So you just have to work your way through that, which is fascinating.
I got one.
Well, I want to talk about you, by the way.
What was your birth experience like?
Okay, Eyla. So me and Bam are kind of kindred spirits. He's like this son or grandkid that showed up into my life, and he feels like he has birth issues, and he can remember the actual experience that wasn't pleasant. And I, on the other hand, have this way of blocking out anything that happened in my life that I felt like was a negative experience. So could you talk about us for a second as kind of weirdos and how we manage in this process of life?
Well, I'm no psychologist, but
should I remember my birth?
It's the limbic
we all
imprint.
remember. It's in the subconscious. We all remember. But again, when we block these things out, it's a coping mechanism. So typically, if your mother had a traumatic birth experience, she's not going to talk about it often with you. And if she does, it's she's reliving the trauma. So I still talk to women in their 50s, 60s, 70s who are in a loop about the
Mm-hmm.
traumatic birth they had, right? Oh, like, oh, it's a terrible experience, X, Y, Z. And so that's what makes me think, wow, like this is a life event that you'll never forget, obviously. And your child, it's embedded in your child's experience and their subconscious. So how do we go about doing as much as we can to make this a positive, empowered experience? So that's one thing. But C-sections are very traumatic for the mother and for the child. I haven't met any women in the last 10 years that I've been doing this work who've told me that they had an incredibly positive experience with the C-section.
Bam, that's what you had, right? Okay.
Yeah, C-section.
Yeah.
And a C-section, so that everyone who's listening knows, is basically a major abdominal surgery where they cut through skin, fascia, fat, muscle, the abdomen, then the uterine wall, another muscle, and then the amniotic sac. And so they have to go through all these layers to reach the baby. And it's traumatic because it interferes with a very natural hormonal process that's happening for the mother to have, were she to have a vaginal birth, which sets off so much in the pituitary gland. So when women are sectioned, they don't get those same triggers, right? They don't get the same signals sent to the brain. They don't have that same biofeedback loop that women with vaginal birth have. So that's why you hear about women who couldn't breastfeed after a C-section, or they didn't want to bond with their baby after the C-section because they didn't get all that oxytocin that you get from a natural birth. So there's a schism that's created not only for the baby but for the mother as well.
Now define schism.
A disconnect.
A disconnect. A break.
Yeah, a break. Yeah, looking at your child and saying, I know you're mine, right? This human part of my brain knows you're my baby. I just birthed you. However, I am not feeling that maternal instinct. I'm not feeling that overdose of oxytocin that is creating this chemical skin imprinting and this chemical bond where I would kill for you. That if anyone touches you, I will completely destroy them, right? That mother bond sometimes is not initiated when we go through a C-section.
That's not good.
No.
That's like W sitting in our world. You know what W sitting is?
Yeah, I've seen kids do it.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's the death move for the musculoskeletal system. It just wrecks the feet, wrecks the hips, puts the body in an energy system that is guaranteed to collapse joints through time. And the child development people know it. And exercise in its modern form is mimicking W sitting. That's what Goata is fighting. So we are, I like to say, pissed off healers. We are pissed off healers, because the modern day fitness people are destroying our joints using W sitting, standing up. If that makes any sense.
And the reason we tolerate it is because through years and years of bad training and weightlifting, what do? We detach ourselves from what our body's telling us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, our physical feeling, our subconscious, like, I'm always sore, I feel like crap. But they've taught us to rationalize, oh, I'm getting stronger, faster.
No pain, no gain.
Sore's the new sexy. Like, that's just the gains that are, in development. As soon as I get unsore, it's going to transform into gains. Fat will transform into muscle. All these industry rationalizations, which are touted like it's science, but it's it's cheesy, really. But then you can be tricked, deceived into rationalizing, and not being in touch with what you're actually feeling, and then it's just a disaster.
Well, Bam.
Is that why there's
Go ahead, Ayla.
Oh, is that why there's so many yo-yo diets, yo-yo exercise routines, right? Because I come across so many people who, they're doing Pilates for 3 months, and then they're doing CrossFit for a year and a half, and then they're doing this and they're doing that, and they're constantly in this state of chronic pain.
Yep.
I just wonder if it's because none of that is sustainable, right? Like none of that's actually working with whole and complete physiology. So how could the body really get addicted to feeling good if it's never really reconnected, right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Well, I said it earlier. You're a Goata coach and you don't even know it. You're a Goata coach, and you've always been a Goata coach for some reason.
Each one of these yo-yos that we're talking about, they're a very tiny piece of the fractal that is the singularity, the greatest, our life, our reality. And then we get addicted to one piece of it, like weightlifting or something else. And it's only a piece, and it's never going to give us the whole spectrum that we need to be a thriving individual. And as Goata coaches, we have, and I've always said this, the most global view of movement that I've ever found that there is right now. I don't know if it can get more global. So we get to see, Eyla, like why people come to us when they've been spending their life in yo-yoing CrossFit, yo-yoing yoga, doing little pieces of the puzzle, and we get to reintegrate them back into a greater movement being in their person. So as you are, like Coach Gill said, a Goata coach, basically. What do you see the yo-yoing and the rationalizations that Josh is talking about in the pregnancy, maternity, birth giving community?
Oh man,
I think you needed this podcast, Eyla. I think you needed this to get a lot of stuff off that mind.
Well, so like I see a lot of what I call greenwashing. I guess a lot of people use that term, but for me, it's like greenwashing, where there's so many people trying to sell to this vulnerable demographic of pregnant people, right? And they're saying, oh, if you do this, it's going to be the best for your baby. If you do this type of prenatal yoga, it's going to be the best for your baby. If you buy these products. So there's so much marketing going on, and people try these things and they don't connect because they're simply being told that it's what's going to help them. They're seeking some kind of salvation, right? Or some kind of guidance. And so they try these things and there's no connection there because I find a lot of this to be empty. And at the end of the day, it doesn't have longevity in what it's offering.
Wow.
And it happens so much. Like it's kind of related, but so many hospitals now are advertising as, we are a mother and baby friendly, natural birth friendly hospital. We have a natural maternity ward or wing. And I'm like, okay, what's going on here? And I look into it and I'm like, oh, there's nothing really behind the curtain. It's just advertising. There's no like birth center back here. There's no like peanut balls, yoga balls. There's no bathtubs. There's none of the stuff that they're trying to sell. It's just a dream.
Mm-hmm.
And so I see that come up a lot. And, in my work, I teach a method that's all about anatomy, unmedicated birth, getting to the core of who you are and how you can carry your birth on your own without anyone else. And it's a harsh reality for a lot of people, but it feels good and exciting because they realize that everything they need is within them already. And they don't need to keep going outside and going elsewhere and spending all this money to attain this birth or this dream. They can manifest it themselves. But crossing the bridges that it takes to get there is sometimes difficult because we have to let go of a lot of the programming that we've been fed our whole lives.
People are scared to let go.
In Goata, as a child, I can remember my earliest memories were like of Arnold Schwarzenegger and Franco Columbu and some of the bodybuilding guys. Um, they just came into the marketplace out of nowhere. Like before that, people just kind of worked. They worked outside. They worked in the yard. My parents were from Central America, so we would spend our 4 months a year from when I was 2 till I was about 7. We would go back to Honduras and Nicaragua, and there was no working out. There was no gyms. There was no people with weights. It was just people work. We went to the river. We washed clothes. We moved around, and then the whole narrative changed. Somewhere when I was about 8 years old to 15 years old, and then I had a barbell and ruined my back. But so is that about the same time this whole birth thing went to hell in a handbasket, around the 70s and 60s?
I think it goes deeper than that.
Or was it before?
It was, well, the word doula is, she said it's Greco-Roman, which is now just Anglo-Norman because they're the torchbearers of this, the cultural lineage that is hierarchical, patriarchal, and they've been trying to own the birth process, I would imagine, this master class since like, different faces have occupied the places, but seems like thousands of years.
Well, when was the first birth in a hospital? Is that documented?
Oh, that I don't know.
Yeah. Eyla, do you know?
So the first C-section was actually performed by a midwife in the islands in the Caribbean. Back then, and that was in the mid 1800s. And back then, the C-section was really save the baby. We can't save the mother because they didn't have the technology to do that. But we didn't really start birthing in hospitals until around the 1890s. And it was mostly just for people who, felt more comfortable working with a male doctor, which is where these physicians were. And then something happened in the 1940s where pharmaceutical companies started producing formula on a mass scale. And there was just this kind of big push to get women into the hospital because it's a huge market. Women are birthing every day all over the world. And a lot of money to be made there. So how do we advertise to people that they're going to have an incredible experience in the hospital, right? So some of the bullet points there are pain-free birth. You could receive general anesthesia, get your baby out, and then you can spend, 5-6 days here after the birth. There's nurses here to take care of your baby. You can sleep. We'll just bring your baby in. You can feed it. We'll take the baby out, and then you can go home. So that was really enticing to a lot of people. You could see why. It's like, oh, I don't have to do this in my home anymore. I don't have to clean up the mess. I can go somewhere. It's clean, nice and neat. It's pain-free. So that's really when it shifted. And then, midwifery started making a comeback in the 70s, and it was really kind of low key. And now midwives are everywhere, but they're so heavily regulated because they take away financial interest from pharmaceutical industries and from the medical industrial complex. So they're heavily regulated state to state. So, when did birth get put, what was it, hell in a handbasket?
The hell in a handbasket. That means the whole thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd say the beginning of last century, and I will say this because this is important for people to know. Fetal and maternal mortality rates have not actually improved at all over the last 100 years since we started birthing in hospitals. So this idea that somehow people are safer and babies are safer is not actually factual.
Yep. That's the scientism aspect of everything. Can we segue over to this concept of what happened to BAM?
Yeah.
So
let's revisit that.
So let's talk. Let's revisit BAM. Let's talk about the potential or mandatory sort of damage that we're doing to the child and the mother when we have this C-section, and then they don't get all the chemicals that they need, I'm assuming, and again, Bam's really smart at this, and you are the experts. What exactly happens, and why are they fighting to be normal, the child and the mother? Like, because
Sure.
has Bam told you his story? Did y'all talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, he mentioned it over the
Bam,
phone.
you want to
just
go
in
over it
brief,
real quick?
But
Yeah, I'll go over it real quick. But my beautiful angel mother had 4 boys. I was the third C-section. So she had 4 C-sections. My oldest brother, it was an emergency C-section, and then so they said since you've had 1 C-section, the rest of the babies basically have to be C-sections as well. So we all were C-section brothers, and I have the only intelligence that I feel like I was born with is this kinesthetic intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Just feeling my body and being aware of it. I spent some time for a little over 4 years on the ambulance, doing 911 stuff in and out of ERs. And ever since I was young, but I really started to unpack this on the ambulance, I have a visceral response to white fluorescent lights, especially in a hospital setting. I just feel like I want to get out of here as quick as I can. I don't want to be around this. So I even inside buildings, I don't like it. And then when I was growing up, I really remember just getting sick maybe twice as much as kids throughout the year, and feeling like, why am I getting sick? My diet wasn't on point at that time, but still to this day, I know I'm pretty susceptible to viral stuff. I know that it doesn't take much for me to slip off and then to get that. So I'm aware of the different things like the secretions that come over me and the symbiotic, my system and my mother's system. And I feel more than anything this deep down thing inside of me that I feel like I was robbed of my birthright experience, of my what I would call the birthright of a human, is to have a natural birth, to have a natural death, to have a natural life. And I feel like my birth experience, I'm salty about it. I'm so grateful I'm here. I'm so grateful my mom went through that. We'll talk about it. She'll show me her scars on her stomach, but I'm salty.
Was she born by C-section, or did her mother have C?
That's a good question. I'm not really sure about that.
Because I saw firsthand how they, what Eyla was talking about. So my ex, she had a daughter, and I think she was born by C-section, and they tell you stuff like, your mother's hips are narrow, it's genetic, your hips are narrow, and she went to the hospital. She didn't have any support by the bedside table. This was in Baltimore. It was like one of these hospitals where I'm not even gonna touch on that, but they pretty much just ripped her open without really consulting her or anybody close to her, and it like left a jagged scar. They didn't even look like they did it very carefully. It's like it was, but she was so adamant. Oh, my hips are too narrow. It's like when they get you, when they now appropriate and take this birth experience and put it in their institutions, in their little lab settings, and then they just confirm what their preordained ideas are. Narrow hips, a lot of that's malnutrition. A lot of people are on this standard American diet, which is basically chicken feed for battery raised humans, and our cranial development is poor, our hip development is poor, so nutritionally and stimulus wise, because we don't sit and say, so we don't sit on the ground, we don't walk 8 miles a day anymore, so the hip girdle atrophies, it doesn't develop, and then so you have a narrow birth opening, so but they convince you that it's all inevitable. Oh, your mother had a C-section. Some people it's just like this, and people are very like it's hard to deprogram them of that notion that like a different lifestyle would have a completely different outcome. It's not an inevitable consequence of genetics and things. Like, no. You didn't
That's
just.
allopathic medicine.
You got a lot to talk about there,
Yeah.
Ayla. That was a lot we just threw at you.
It's not just your genetic destiny.
You got
that
the next 30 minutes on your own, talking about Bam and Coach Josh's preordained
Taking
concepts.
notes over here.
But they look in science, replicability is a big thing, but they've captured the birth experience in their hospitals and stuff. So, and then they just jerry-rig the whole thing so it kind of like produces the results they expect. Meanwhile, you look at the hunter-gatherer literature, go back to best practices, and women, generally speaking, I mean, they would have unproblematic births. They would walk out in the bush many times alone, have birth in a squatting position, and it was by our standards a non-event. There was no guy in a lab coat standing over you in the cold hospital. Everything's cold and right angle and bright, and people are like either cold and clinical or panicking, and But go ahead.
Yeah.
You got your notes?
Thanks, guys.
You have your notes?
I kind of just
I
drifted
did, but
off
I
because I
can't
kind of
even-
rambled.
A little bit about Bam, a little bit about hips, hip abilities.
Bam, thank you so much for sharing that story. Very
You're welcome. Thank you.
emotional to hear that.
My back is his birth. You do realize that, right? My back is your birth. Same thing.
Yeah. Sorry to cut you off.
Salty,
but Coach
pissed.
Joe always wants to know, like, why am I so drawn to like natural movement? I feel like I was taken from the natural world and put in this unnatural world, and I'm fighting my way back. So.
Yeah, and a lot of people share that experience and that sentiment. So first, I just want to address that a lot of women are told that once they have a C-section, they can only have a C-section afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to have a vaginal birth after a C-section, that's called a VBAC. And it's totally possible. I've attended many of these VBAC births. However, it's a very easy way to hook in someone who doesn't know any better into getting another $30,000 procedure, which is a C-section. So there's money to be made from this surgery. In rare cases, if a woman has a C-section and then gets pregnant again and wants to do a natural birth, if the surgery wasn't done properly, if the uterus wasn't closed properly before, it is possible that in the contractions of the muscle of the uterus that that scarring could open. That is possible, and it has happened. So there would need to be an assessment made by someone who's skilled to see how did this scar heal? How was this surgery done previously? Is this woman a good candidate for a vaginal birth after cesarean? So the woman just has to be given that choice. But to just be told off the bat, oh, you've already done a C-section, you got to keep doing it for all of them, that is completely disempowering and tyrannical. So that's that. And for the people I've talked to who've had this experience that you've had, they say similar things. Having an aversion to fluorescent lighting, having an aversion to being in hospitals, having an aversion to the sound of a heart monitor, right? That beep, beep, those kinds of things kind of come back for them. They stimulate something that's buried in the subconscious that was traumatic. So the fact that you're even aware of that and can do some work to heal that on your own is really powerful. This thing about reoccurring issues with the immune system through childhood and through life is very real. When we're born vaginally, naturally, we collect all of that really beneficial bacteria as we're passing through the vaginal canal, which is coating us and stimulating the development of the microbiome, right? The microbiome on the skin and the microbiome in the gut, which is why breastfeeding immediately after birth is so important for the baby, because that that colostrum that they get within those first few minutes after the birth stimulates the gut. And that's how the immune system starts to build. Unfortunately, what happens is with a C-section, many babies don't get that opportunity because the mother goes here, the baby goes there, and they're separated for sometimes, 3, 4, 5 hours. They don't get all that beneficial bacteria from the vaginal canal. They don't get that initial breastfeeding. So they're compromised from the start. And then that is further compounded by all of the procedures that are done at the hospital for the newborn. Hepatitis B vaccine within 2 hours after birth. For what? Is the baby going to be exchanging needles and having sex with someone who's Hep B positive? No. So is the mother Hep B positive? Maybe, but usually not. So what is this about, right? So there's an immediate attack on the newborn's immune system with this vaccine, right? Overstimulating the immune system when it doesn't even have an immune system to begin with. That's part of that. And I could go more deeply into vaccinations and childhood procedures and how they're being very heavily mismanaged, but that's a different conversation. So the other thing that comes up is women are being told, oh yeah, you're petite and we just did an ultrasound and this baby looks like it's going to be 8-9 pounds, so we should just go ahead and schedule your C-section because you're not going to be able to do it and you're going to have a really difficult birth. So the fear is just put into them from the get-go, and they go through this whole pregnancy thinking, my body's incapable, my body can't do it, I'm not worthy, I've failed my baby, and now I have to do this procedure, right? That's like the subconscious narrative that's going on. Whether women want to rationalize it and be positive on the surface, that's another story, but really that's what's happening in the subconscious. I'm not enough, I failed, my body failed. And so, in my work, in my classes, and in my support as a guide and a doula, I break open all of this garbage that people are being fed. And I say, all right, I'm going to show you a woman who's 4'11", 125 pounds, and then I'm going to show you a photo of her twin boys that she birthed at home. How can you tell me that you're not capable, 5'7", 140 pounds, birthing a 7-pound baby? How can you not be capable of that if this woman who's tiny was capable of this? So it's just simply showing them that there is another way, that there are possibilities, helps so much. And in the work that I do, I'm like, your medical provider's telling you this, you're getting anxiety every time you're going to the doctor's office. How about we find a different doctor? I know a lot of great doctors here in South Florida. They're not going to speak to you like that. They're going to empower you. You can also speak to some midwives, so a lot of this is about finding the right medical guidance, but people just don't know. And people just do what their mom did or what their sister did or what their best friend did. They don't ask questions, and they just kind of go through what I call the conveyor belt of birth.
And when they do ask questions, they're probably treated like they're crazy.
Oh, totally. They're told things like, you don't want to put your baby in danger, do you? And then you're like, well, of course not. I'm simply trying to gather information.
They do that with
But
Goata.
there's an ego power drama with medical professionals very often.
They do that with Goata. There's no science behind Goata. Oh, they always say. And I'm like, there's no science behind walking forward?
I see people writing that crap on Instagram, on different Instagram accounts, like, there's no science here, and I'm like, wow, it just makes so much sense to me, and I'm not even like a Goata pro. I just like what I'm seeing here just makes sense, but some people love living in scientism. It's their religion.
Yeah, we've battled as a narrative, sort of like the same thing you've been battling. We've been battling the same narrative, which is cadaver science derivatives, which is birthing at home is one of them. I mean, birthing in the hospital with it used to be a male gynecologist does the births, right? Is that the way it's always been? Mostly males. And then they rob you of your own right to own your own birth experience. And that's the same thing in our industry. In order for you to exercise, you have to hire a doctor in physical therapy, or you have to hire an anatomical physiologist, or you don't know how you should even be exercising because you don't have the science, is what they tell us. I got the 5 fingers, 5 on each hand. I've got 5 toes on each hand. I have 3 arches in each foot. I think I'm going to be all right. You know what I'm saying? So I just find it ridiculous, and I won't put up with it, and that's why I'm pissed off. But, Bam, you good with that? You feel like she answered a lot of your
Yeah, I feel
angst,
yeah,
the saltiness.
yeah, but I want to go salty, in a different way.
All right.
That microbiotic lineage you were talking about, which is your inheritance, your human inheritance. You
Yes.
think of how many thousands of generations that was passed from mother to child, and then every C-section is a violation of that. But the good news is I mean, if you know what you're doing, you can reclaim some of it. It's not going to be the same put together as
Right.
it was, in the continuity, the continuum. Everyone should read the continuum concept, by the way. But the continuum of that,
Get me the Cliff Notes.
the continuum concept's more about
No, let's not talk about continuity. Go ahead.
That
Go
one's
ahead.
more about
Let's stay on.
childhood development.
Let's stay on Eyla. 'Cause
rather than
she's-
the birth
We invited
experience.
her to the podcast.
So,
Yeah.
Okay, going salty in a better way. The way that I like to operate my brain and how things go. If I feel like I had this experience that wasn't the best and I'm salty about it, the good salt is, how would I want my child to come into the world? And the image that is in my brain is this woman naked, swag Goata walking down the beach into the water, and head is high, gets into the water, waist height, squats, pulls up a baby from, this image in my brain of the salt water rushing across the baby's face as it's gasping for its first breath of air. The sun is one of the first sensations besides the cold water, is then now this warm sun just boom on this baby, and then now the mother and this child, my hypothetical child,
all 4 inside ankle bones high.
all 4 inside ankle bones are high,
The babies
and this
and
great
mother.
experience. And I know that if I was a woman and I knew I was going to be pregnant and I wanted to have some kind of experience like this, I would for sure have some trepidation onto what it would be like. Is it possible? Is something like that possible? Is it going to be painful? Do I need to have somebody there just in case something goes bad? What would it be like, or what is that dream, that salty dream that I have for my future potential children? Is that possible? And what does that look like?
It looks like the movie Birth into
First of
Being.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna send that to you guys. I have that film. I'll send
Elena
it to you guys.
Tanetti Vladimirova. Is that?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if I
I show
pronounced
it
that
in
right.
all my classes.
Yeah, that's money.
Bam, I think that a really useful exercise for you that it would be very powerful is to visualize that birth, because what you described is your higher self healing your own experience. So imagine yourself as that baby, right? And if you continue to replay that, you can heal the experience you had at your birth. That's one. And second, this birth is totally possible to have. There are places where you can go uninhibited, where a midwife would follow you there, different locations around the world where this can happen. But it would really take a lot of work for your partner to, depending on who she is, to break through any fears, because it is a huge act in surrender, allowing the body to drive the experience, which we are so not good at doing most of the time because we all have control issues. So a lot of that is just is practicing surrender. And you could definitely, you guys could definitely have a birth like that.
Well, I really like what you're talking about a lot of the fear. So like the more the mental side, the psychological side about it. What about physically? You know, is this something like, if you want, like for Goata, if I want to align myself with nature's mathematical way of how I'm supposed to move, I have to consider everything: how I'm brushing my teeth, how I go number one, go number two. I'm aware of my movement then. I'm aware of my movement right now. How am I sitting? It kind of bleeds into my entire life. So if this, if a woman, if this hypothetical lady who's, what kind of things does she have to consider in this? Is this a whole lifetime of consideration? Is this something that somebody can do from the couch, just go out and do it because they want to do it? Or is this, what kind of preparation and understanding and physical abilities do you need?
I have, I used to always believe and teach that there was physical preparation necessary. And now, since, yes, August is when I started practicing these Goata principles, I realized that this is like the key, or like this missing link to really preparing the female body for this experience. Yeah. And I would almost like to see women recoding before they even become pregnant. But of course, It's never too late. It's never too late to start. Better late than never.
Would you say access?
So yeah, what's that?
I was just gonna say, what caught your eye? Do you think like access to the flat-footed resting squat is like paramount? Because my perception is that that's really important. Like, these women are told, oh, you've got tight hips. Part of that, I mentioned like the nutritional thing, but also it's soft tissue. Like, if you're all bound up, your pelvic floor muscle, you do not want to give birth with tight pelvic floor muscles, I would imagine. I've never had to consider that on a personal level, but
you want it to be toned. You want the lower part of your core. You want the pelvic floor to be toned. You don't want it to be tight. So as you're doing Kegels, I recommend women using weights during pregnancy and practicing Kegels. But you also need to create a supple tissue. You need to support a supple tissue. So that requires squatting often, if not all the time. In my classes, even before Goata, I was like, you need to squat while you're texting, you need to squat while you're emailing, you need to squat while you're sitting. It was always like the squat, because when you birth in a squatting position, it's fast, it's swift, it's easy, it's less painful. We just don't live daily life that way, right? We're sitting in a chair at the table, we're sitting in a chair, or driving in the car, sitting at the desk, doing all the things. And so when women first come into my class, they can barely handle an assisted squat for more than a minute. So yeah, I think the squat is paramount. It's like the foundation. And typically in other cultures, we're whittling wood in a squat, we're eating in a squat, we're communing in a squat, we're gathering in a squat. It's like, we just don't do that anymore. And so much of the homework that I give is just like reintroducing that into daily routine, and not even through the scope of Goata, just like whatever you can get, if it's leaning against a wall, if that's all you can handle because you haven't done a squat in 20 years, like let's just start there.
Could you imagine not doing a squat in 20 years? Ooh. Wow. I'd like to see that gait pattern. Yeah. I mean, we see some insane things in slow motion video, and it's all coming from not owning the two evolutionary poses, which is the squat and the hinge. And then very few people on planet Earth understand that those two poses are the underpinning or the infrastructure to the contralateral locomotive pattern. So you should own them at the highest level 10, which I don't, unfortunately, because of my 3 levels of degenerative disc. But but these two guys do, and it's a pleasure to even be hanging out with high level Goatas all the time. So, but yeah, we could definitely help your team, the mothers, and our journey as Goata coaches is to save the world's connective tissue. But as I talk to you guys in other modalities, it's almost to save the world's babies too, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Save the world's babies. Okay, now let's segue over to we good, huh, Bam?
We're good.
Good. Let's segue over to you asking us any questions. Did you have any questions for us, or you just really wanted to kind of get a lot of your stuff out?
Yeah, I mean, this is just more like specifics and technique stuff on like improving the physical experience for my clients and my community. But I think at this point I might just have to go certify with you guys in Louisiana.
Yes, please come down.
We'd love to have you. We'd love to have you.
Yeah,
and we'd love to have you a part of the universe, which is Coach Bam and the Goata boys and some of these guys. We're going to start an app where anybody in the world will be able to download the app, and they will be able to go into the app into places like your modality of having a birth experience that's world class and in harmony with nature. Those things will be there. You'll be able to go in, say, go to birth, and then you'll be there with all the people that you've taught, and there'll be videos on how to prepare, and there'll be how to hire you guys in video conference. So we're trying to put that together over the next 3 months, and that's our next phase or evolving of the Goata concept. So that's where we're going. But yeah, we'd love to have you a Goata coach anyway. So, all right. So tell us about your experience with Goata. How'd you find us? I know you got a coach. Is Coach John your coach?
Yes, John DeFeedy.
He's awesome, huh?
He's incredible.
Yeah.
I call him my angel.
Yeah.
It was probably it was back in August, and there's a physical therapist here who was in one of my classes in the community that I'm a part of. I remained social and very active as far as community engagement throughout all of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And so regularly going to African dance. And one of the friends in the community, he's a physical therapist and he does Goata. And so he looked at me and said, I need to do an assessment on you. He's not a Goata coach, but he had been working with John. He's like, I need to do an assessment on you. He's like, you got this weird S curve going on. And I was like, what's that?
I love it.
Took a photo and he showed me, and I was mortified. I said, I look like that?
Okay, now explain that to us with your hand. Draw like what are we talking about? Curve? Was in your spine? Was it in your hip and knee area?
My shoulders were hunched forward. My shoulders were hunched forward, and my tuchus was sticking out. It was like this weird.
Okay.
Hyperlordotic.
Yeah, hyperlordotic or hip. We call it front chain dominant from the hip pose. Okay,
yeah, and he said, look, and so he started doing some like manipulation in my shoulders, and I realized, like in a psychosomatic sense, there's a lot going on in my heart area, right, for a long time. And so I started to realize so much of this crowding in the front that I had was a protective mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as I started addressing those issues that were all contained here, I was also able to address the physical component, which was just strengthening my shoulders, strengthening my back, and activating my glutes, which I had never really done before. And I did almost 12 years of gymnastics, 6 years of volleyball, and 4 years on the diving team. So, I was like considered myself an athlete. And I won't even get into like the crazy yoga shit that I did for almost a decade. But I just like, I realized, I've never really used my back chain, my glutes. So when I got the opportunity to figure out how to activate them, I felt already my posture shifted. So then that's when I contacted Ricky Stanzi and I worked with him digitally for a little while. And then I said, I really need the in-person support. You know, it's like I'm such an
every coach knows that, by the way. So as a coach know that being in person with a coach is I call it the boss card, or the ace in the hole, or the elite level world class instructing. And I resisted video conferencing coaching, and now we do it with app. Well, we'll coach you over the digital app. But I resisted it forever, and I was told, well, Goata's never going to go anywhere until you adopt Instagram and you start teaching people over the Skype. It's just not. And so I did it, and it's worked, and we're saving a lot of connective tissue now. So explain that, why we get that, why we as coaches, you knew you needed John DeFedes to have the elite level. Yep.
Well, so much of healing happens because this other person's energy is in your sphere, right? Mm-hmm. There is something to be said for being in the presence of someone else that is a healer, and I consider John DeFedes to be a healer. And so working with him immediately, he looked at my video assessment that Ricky had done, and he was like, okay, I see what's going on here. My right inner ankle bone was just like basically on the ground, and I hadn't been able to run.
We're not laughing at you. We're laughing with you.
We know the pain.
We know the pain.
No, I hadn't been able to run in like 6 years because I had knee pain that came out of nowhere. And so when I started correcting the way that I walked, the way that I rested, the way that I sat, I was able to start walking, jogging, and then eventually running again, barefoot on grass. Because I think running on concrete is ridiculous no matter what kind of shoe you have. It's just not right.
It is.
So
it is. I agree with that.
So yeah, I've been working with John, I guess now since September, and it's been incredible. I've learned so much about my body. I connected with you guys because of that. Mm-hmm. Even just in the few videos that he's posted of me doing some of the work, it's already gotten a lot of my clients and students engaged in, postpartum, post-birth healing, So just they want to find a way to heal after they have a baby. And I think that Goata could really be powerful for that.
That's going to be in the universe.
Yeah.
It's going to be in the universe.
You touched on something that I think is really important. We really look at movement, and a lot of times we have our hands on athletes or people within our sphere. I've had the opportunity, though, to work with some women and do their recode, and it's always very objective. It's why Goata works and why I love it. It's here or it's not here, or it's somewhere else. So when we talk about things like back chain dominant, where the hips are behind the rib cage, chest is upright, we're looking here. I've had a few clients say, I understand, I can feel it, but I don't want to go out in the world and walk like this because I feel like I'm sticking my ass out. I feel like I'm having my chest out. And what you talked about, this heart chakra, this place right here protecting, Goata will ask you to shed that and to adopt your natural, childlike, innate way of being, which does not hold these traumatic or protective lines of tension. And I just want to say that is an obstacle that I've faced, and we need people like you who have a really strong ability to hold space and to have these psychosomatic conversations with people, because it's big, it's huge.
Bam, did you ever feel like unaddressed psychosomatic things inhibited you from accessing that surrender that she was talking about? Surrendering and being, because we've been coached like, grind, work. It should be hard. You should be straining. And then when you get into Goata and you surrender into it, you're like, do you ever have that moment where like, that felt too easy. That can't be it. And then like you're almost afraid to experience, you know, people who have been traumatized, they almost can't let themselves feel joy. You know what I'm saying? Because they're so attached to that feeling scape that comes from the unaddressed traumas, and you're like, how can that be it? Like exercise is supposed to be laborious. Like it feels too easy. Maybe I'm not working hard enough. Did you ever have moments where you felt like that inhibited you from surrendering into the Goata, the singularity?
Goata came into my life at a really special time when I was willing to do the work and to integrate whatever needed to happen. So the recode for me was always about integrating different parts of myself that were maybe traumatized or had protective mechanisms. Actually, just 2 days ago, I revisited one that's in my left shoulder, which was from a really bad call in the accident that I had, where I had to hold this position for an extended period of time, and it ingrained a line of tension in my kind of my armpit area. And every once in a while it creeps up, but Goata gives me a mapping system to reintegrate that into a normalcy, which is really powerful. But I know that because I've been searching, I found people like Coach Gill and other people that I have coaches inside of my head that I'm able to use their language, their knowledge to work within myself. And I know that people are coming to the table with way fewer tools, and why that's what excites me about someone like Eyla coming on our radar, because she's going to be able to speak to some people that I can't really speak to.
Yep. Eyla, have you ever heard of Erin Lowe with the Goula Gals? Goula. Goula Gals. Erin Lowe was the director of she's kind of like Coach Bam and Coach Ricky. They do the she did the education for foundation training, which is a back chain dominant technology developed by a chiropractor doctor named Eric Goodman. It's fascinating work. I love it. And she split off from them to teach pelvic floor dysfunction reprogramming, and they call it the Goula Gals. So I just figured you might have heard of her because y'all seem to have a lot in common. She's on the other side of the world. Yes, she's on the other side of the world. So she's in Santa Barbara and you're in Miami, I'm guessing, huh? Yeah, it's opposite side of the world from you. But look her up, Erin Lowe, Goula Gals, Goula, Goula, and y'all would get along great. What else, guys? Y'all got any other questions? I just had a great time today.
I have a question.
When a lot of people ask me like the elevator speech for Goata, because I'm walking around talking about it to everybody, and I feel like I just sound like
that is the new thing they must be teaching people in business school, because I went to business school and they didn't have an elevator speech 30 years ago. But that is by the way, for y'all, that is the new thing everybody's saying, the elevator speech. So what explain that, your version of the elevator speech, Eyla, and then we'll give it to you. What do you think what defines that term or those terms?
So, if you're in an elevator, right, with someone, you're going up 10 floors, how are you going to explain and sell? How are you going to make that valuable to the other person?
In the shortest amount of time. In the
shortest amount of time.
Okay.
How are you going to convert that sale? Not that that's what this is about, but because I tell people are always talking about pain in their body, and I have to go to the chiropractor every week. And I'm like, no, you don't. And I used to be one of those people, don't get me wrong. I don't know how many thousands of dollars I've spent on all of these modalities that I become dependent on, and they're not doing anything, obviously.
And that's the inherent problem. The inherent problem that is you're dependent on. All right. Why don't we do this? And I'll let Josh go first because he likes to ramble on. So he Josh, do you have an elevator speech for Goata?
Ooh, challenge for
No,
challenge for
I'm
Josh
afraid.
right
I'm
here.
afraid I would babble for 10 floors and I would step out and I'd be like, basically like Will Ferrell in the movie Elf. Oh, I forgot to give you a hug, and I would just look like some crazy person.
We do need an esoteric version of an elevator speech for Goata, and you are the guy. You the esoteric, brilliant genius of the organization.
Try to think of something.
Bam, you have one.
Yeah, I always bring it back to themselves personally. I say, did you know that when you were born, you were born in this position, and then you did this thing, and then you changed and changed and changed, and eventually one day you stood up and then you walked, and you did that before you even knew how to talk. So nobody could tell you, put your left foot here, put your right hand here, put your head here, put your spine there. You knew. So you had some communication with your body that allowed you to teach your own self how to walk. And that communication and that knowledge is always there with you. And Goata will help you get back to that place of your innate movement abilities that will keep you pain-free, keep your joints healthy, and active for the rest of your life. That's my elevator speech.
You know what mine is? First of all, I have the unique ability to sort of mimic the person's behavior or their frame of reference. So if I can get a frame of who they are, or if they are saying I've got back pain, or I've got knee pain, or I've got hip pain, then I will use that language to give the elevator speech. So I wouldn't have one canned, but if I did, it would go something like this. We are nature in our very essence. We are an energy in our very essence. And when we are abiding by nature's mathematical energy rules, and we are in harmony with nature, which means we are, by default, anti-fragile and pain-free. What you're feeling in your body, that knee pain, is a complete violation of the mathematics. And all you have to do is get back to nature. And if you want, you can go to this website called goatamovement.com and just start your journey back to healing using nature's mathematics. But nobody, unless you've been chopped up, has to live with pain in a joint. Because we can see it in slow motion video, and we can design a recipe, we call it a regimen, based on the misbehaving mathematical breaks. Oh, you called it earlier, schisms. We can fix it. Well, we don't actually fix it, but we as great chefs of movement can give you a recipe that's perfectly designed for you to remove, eradicate, and abolish chronic pain for life, and give you the ability to go back and do what you were designed to do, which is to walk, skip, and run forward in a anti-fragile, pain-free state for life. Is that short enough, or was that too long?
We could workshop that a little bit. But I think it was.
It's too long.
I liked it.
Yeah.
I'm saying it's hard. Like, and I'm not even in your world, and I still am like, and people are like, okay, and I'm like, how do I get this information across to you?
Yeah.
Just
a lot of the women that
you're violating math. You're violating nature's math. It's an easy fix. Go find a Goata gal coach. Go to find a Goata guy coach. Go to this website. It's an easy fix. If you make it sound like it's an easy fix, they're gonna say, she said it was easy. Now you got to do the work. That's the hard part. But the identifying of it is very easy.
I would like to hear Ayla's elevator speech.
Yeah. Give us your impromptu elevator speech, Eyla.
What if I told you everything you've been told about the birth experience is wrong?
Oh,
how do you red pill them?
What's that?
I said, how do you red pill them on the birth experience? How do you? Because the elevator speech is an appeal to the intellect, you know. So that's kind of the uphill. You're fighting the good fight, the uphill battle, because you're fighting all the societal programming, which is fueled by, you know, the narrative managers who steer perceptions. They've got incredible resources behind them. So, you know, you might give them that elevator speech and their intellect might still be like unsure, but you walk away, Goata. That's what we need, really. We need to appeal to people's the C-feel, the subconscious C-feel technology. They see people walking Goata like, oh, that's smooth, that's graceful. It looks, you know, it looks sexy, whatever.
Effortless. Yep, sexy.
And then
effortless.
they're going to start subconsciously mimicking it. And that's where you, you know, it's asymmetrical warfare. We don't have, you know, billions of dollars in hedge funds and things to throw at PR agencies and stuff. So you don't take it. You don't fight them on their own battlefield. You just move through the world and set the great example, and people imitate. But it's easier with Goata because we can walk around every day. People aren't seeing the birth experience every day because it's all hidden out of view and sanitized and behind these curtains in these sanitized institutions, boxes within boxes. So how do you appeal to them with more than just, you know, the I guess the intellectual argument?
Well, I tend to like Coach Gill said, I read them and I see where the need is, right? So depending on what they present to me, I always have something to give. So if someone says to me, you know, I had a really difficult postpartum experience, you know, after I'm pregnant again, and after the first one, I had terrible postpartum depression, and I'm so scared it's going to happen again. And I say, well, when I talk about the placenta, you know, I say, did you know that birth is the only time in your life where within 24 hours you're going to have a significant drop in hormones, and that can cause postpartum depression? If you consume your placenta through capsules or through various other forms, you can actually wean yourself off of that drop in hormones, and you can most likely prevent postpartum depression from happening again. So in that little statement, they go, what? My placenta? I didn't even know that I made a placenta. I didn't even know that I could keep my placenta. I didn't even know that there was a natural alternative to this. So if that's a concern, you know, I'm offering evidence, I'm offering a solution. And then they say, well, you know, that sounds a little weird to me. I say, well, either you keep it or the hospital keeps it and they sell it to a stem cell therapy company.
Yes.
So which one are you going to choose? And people are like, what? You know, so I kind of like red pill them a little bit, but it ultimately empowers them because they realize that they have so many options. You know, people say, I want to prevent a C-section. That's my goal. How do I get there? Okay, you know, these are the 3 steps you can take. Avoid pain drugs, avoid epidurals, get a doula, take classes, you know. And so then the conversation blossoms, but I kind of like hit them with some facts, and depending on what it is that they're needing, you know, what the concern is, I guess.
So part of it is kind of likening it to other sensory experiences, to the point where they'll feel that it's right or that you're onto something or whatever, and you put that hook in them and that can override some of the, you know, doubt or suspicion that might be hang up for them, much of which is implanted through, you know, all these sources that we've talked about.
And also, Josh, people don't like to get taken advantage of, right? So when I present information, I can expose to people that a lot of the options available benefit someone else and not them. And that just gets them going. So, you know, there's a lot of money to be made. This doesn't have to be this way. You have these options. So people, just by virtue of not wanting to get taken advantage of, they'll start doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
And then however their journey unfolds, it unfolds. But that's usually, I think that's one of the main, like, that's what drives my elevator speeches, are just, illustrating how they can avoid being taken advantage of and be empowered in their own experience.
Wow.
Do you ever feel like you run up against a barrier where it's so uncomfortable to realize that they've been taken advantage of by other vested interests? Okay, so for example, I don't want to believe that the weightlifting garbage ruined my body. I'd much rather believe that all that hard work, the blood, sweat, and tears was good for me, just like they told me, etc. But so for some people, I feel like if they can get away with it, they'll remain in denial. Do you ever feel like you get a response from that out of people? Like, because I feel like a lot of the WOTA coaches and stuff, nobody out there with a CS or their athletic training degree wants to believe that, like, they put all that work into their degree and all these years in their career, and it was on a partially faulty foundation, or maybe wholly faulty foundation. But I was trying to be diplomatic.
I totally hear you. Over the years, I've had physician's assistants in my classes. I've had doctors. I had an anesthesiologist 3 years ago in one of my classes, and he came with his wife. And I mean, he's a doctor, he's an anesthesiologist, and I'm talking about how pain drugs are the antithesis of birth. And after the class, he had this, obviously, I mean, I don't know, maybe he's not practicing anymore, but he said, I really feel that I need to take a break from this work. I really feel that you shook my entire foundation to the core. And I would never want my wife to receive the drugs after learning what I've learned, yet this is what I do for a living. He's
That's
like,
heavy.
I can justify it when I'm going to, when it's going to happen for a surgery, a corrective surgery. I can no longer justify this for birth.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to people who've had traumatic birth experiences and, trying to red pill them a little bit for the second pregnancy, the second birth, if they're ready to transform, if they're ready to walk the mile, then they've got to put that ego down, they've got to put it aside. And a lot of the times they do. They say, I don't want to go through that again. No matter how much I believed in it before, I don't want to go through that again. So just tell me what I need to dismantle and how I can build something new.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I get people who are like, I'm not ready for this.
Mm-hmm.
It's so similar to destroying a joint and having it repaired, or destroying a lumbar spine or a thoracic spine. It's so similar, where you can destroy a level of your spine and go through the pain of that, and then meet a Goata coach and say, yeah, I'm not ready for that yet. And then another one goes,
Yeah.
It's like, maybe now I'm ready, but it's insane. Talk about the, yep. I would like to hear more about the placenta and all the stem cell related stuff. And I'll tell you a little story. And then you can sort of expound on your experience and my story. So about 3.5 years ago, I did a corrective surgery for my eyes. And right about the same time I was doing some intermittent fasting stuff, and I really started to feel terrible. So I know for a few wealthy people, and they were like, yeah, you really should fly to California, fly to South Florida and get a stem cell drip. So I was like, it's very expensive, by the way. So I was like, okay. So I did it. And I got to tell you, I have a side effect from the corrective surgery called dry eye, and it didn't help with that, but it really made me feel great. Like I did a drip. I couldn't drink alcohol for a month. It got me out of this rut that I was in with the intermittent fasting thing that crippled my body. And the guy who had access to the stem cells, a little bit spilled on his hands, and he was an old guy like me. So he put it on his nose and he started rubbing it in, and he's like, rubbing it on his cheeks.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, man, what are you doing? He's like, oh man, this stuff is magic. I mean, the cells are gonna start multiplying, and I'm like, all right. So tell me about the power of placenta and the stem cell magic, and why, because all the great athletes are now doing these drips once a month. I mean, how amazing is this stuff?
Well, so I train other people who want to become placenta encapsulation specialists. I train them in that whole process, and I really believe in it. And I just, for anyone who's listening who doesn't know, the placenta is a disposable organ that the woman produces during the pregnancy. So using the DNA of the male, right, the sperm of the male and the egg of the female, they create the baby, and they also create the placenta together. So it belongs to both of them. So after the birth, the baby comes out, right? The baby comes out, goes on the mother's chest, ideally, and then maybe 10, 20 minutes later, the placenta comes out. It's common practice to immediately cut the umbilical cord, which, by the way, prevents all of that cord blood and all of those stem cells from going to the baby. But that's a whole other conversation.
Wow.
So they cut the cord.
So it should stay on there for a while. The cord should stay on the baby while the baby's on the mother's belly or the chest area for a while. And there's this process, a time frame that has to pass. Okay.
And so the alternative scenario is snip it and then put them in a plastic tray real quickly, give them some vaccine, some glyphosate-laced formula, not hold them. Is that the general?
He's smart, huh?
Typically, that's what it looks like.
Yep.
And I'm here to completely correct those,
Say it. I want to hear this. Say how it should be.
Those atrocities.
That's what they are.
So how it should is the mother. So the baby should be born, right? We have this little baby.
Yeah.
It should come out.
Aw.
It's a little Goata on this side. So the baby should. And the mother should be the one who catches the baby. Nobody else should touch or grab this baby. The mother should be the one. And if she's in a squat, she can do that with complete power and control. She can grab her own baby and she can put it onto her chest. And this cord, this umbilical cord, is an average of 21 inches long, and it's designed so that the placenta can still be inside while the baby's up here. And then the baby goes to the chest, and all this oxytocin is flowing between the both of them. They're bonding, and that oxytocin will stimulate her uterus, which will then expel the placenta. Most mammals will eat their placenta right away.
The mother will.
Mm-hmm.
The mother
will.
Or the tribe.
The mammalian.
The tribe will together, or just the mother?
No, I think she's talking about non-human mammals.
Okay.
Mammalian animals,
Mm-hmm.
the females. And there's a few reasons that they consume the placenta. One is that they want to eliminate any trace for predators to find them, right? They want to cover their tracks because they're vulnerable with their new baby. They're not in that kind of mode of defense. Second, everything inside of the placenta has the ability to help her cells regenerate and multiply. So she can start that healing process. She can replenish her iron. She's not going to be able to hunt for a few days, depending on the dynamic of that specific animal. So she needs to have some nourishment that's going to tide her over until she can hunt again or she can receive food. And what happens with the hormones in that placenta is that it can also constrict the uterus immediately to prevent postpartum hemorrhage. So it's this beautiful design, this instinct that if I eat this, I will not bleed out the next few hours. I'm naturally constricting my own uterus. Okay. And then that's that. She doesn't make capsules. Obviously, it's like an orangutan out in the wild. They're not doing that. But humans have the option to create capsules, put a piece of it raw in a smoothie, consume it immediately. You can make a broth from it. You could chop it up with liver and onions kind of thing. You can do that. So women have a lot of options. So after the birth, after the placenta comes out, you want the cord to stay intact between the baby and the placenta for a few hours. The reason that they're cutting the cord immediately after the birth is because they're taking the placenta away, storing it, donating it to stem cell therapy companies. You know, they're calling it bio waste. And what's happening is that the baby's getting robbed of all that cord blood and all the stem cells that should be going back into its body. That's why we're seeing babies with anemia, low iron, just general kind of malaise after birth. They're not very vigorous and fortified. And so ideally you leave that placenta attached. And then after a few hours, maybe 2-3 hours, you can detach it. I would suggest doing a burning rather than a cutting. When you burn the cord to separate it, all the chi that's in that cord goes back to the baby, chi being energy.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, you can do what you wish. And if you don't want to consume your placenta, you can bury it in the backyard with a new fruit tree. I mean, I don't know. Or you can let the hospital have it and they'll do what they'll do with it. They'll create a stem cell medicine from it that you'll go get an IV drip, or some athlete will go get an IV drip from that.
That's what they did,
yeah. Yeah, so ideally you're keeping that attached for some time. And there's something called the Lotus Birth where you leave it attached for 3-4 days.
Wow.
The placenta and the baby. You're coating the placenta daily like you would salt a meat to preserve it. Mm-hmm. So you're coating the placenta daily with coarse salt. You're changing the dressings. And eventually what happens is that cord dries out and it separates naturally on its own. So there's some people, you know, in Asia, they practice this a lot, where they believe that the baby and the placenta have their own relationship and nobody should interfere with that. So they practice Lotus Birth in those parts of the world. And it's making a comeback here in the United States, just because people are becoming more conscious of the spiritual connection between the placenta and the baby, but also the benefits of leaving everything intact.
Wow.
Man, I think we got a lot of mothers in our society that are, you know, back at work in 4 days. Back at their jobs.
That's a whole episode.
So the drip itself, because a lot of people, it's still under FDA monitoring. So they haven't officially approved it. But the fellow I was working with was working under a study at USC. So, you know, it's okay for you to have it as long as you're working under the studies.
Yeah, you sign its liability.
Yep.
Liability.
So would you recommend it, or you think it works, or you think I just had a placebo effect?
Totally. You know, there's Chinese medicine doctors that are, you know, amazing work that they're doing, but they're taking these placental cells and they're suggesting for them to be injected before surgery is done, right? So if you're going to operate on a specific part of the body, to actually inject that area with the stem cells so that the regeneration can happen more quickly and more immediately.
Yep, sounds like PRP. PRP's like that. You take your own blood and they spin it.
Right, the plasma.
Yep.
Yeah, so, you know, a lot of this is anecdotal evidence. They're not doing studies on the benefits of placenta consumption because a lot of institutions are not going to benefit financially from this at all. Like Big Pharma is not going to benefit from this. So why would they do anything to support the studies? But a lot of this is anecdotal evidence. I will say that. Women who I've worked with over the years who didn't consume their placenta for the first baby, then consumed the placenta for the second baby, say that they feel significant differences in their energy, in their recovery. They're walking more easily after the birth. Their moods are not going up and down so dramatically. Their breast milk is coming in. Their breast milk supply is more abundant. So, you know, I hear so many of these stories, and I think that that's where we should really be looking, is all of these experiences that women are having, not what, you know, your OB says. Because at the end of the day, that's not getting taught. The placenta is not getting tossed in the trash. It's getting donated to stem cell therapy companies who are creating medicines for people around the world.
Wow, there's just so many parallels between what you're doing and what a Goata coach does. It's almost identical. The way big corporation, big medicine, big cadaver science, and Goata and everything you and the natural childbirth. All right, we're gonna be wrapping this up. Josh, anything else? Any quick comments?
Well, just related to what you just said, you talk a lot about the this holocaust of human connective tissue that's going on. So, you know, people will be like, oh, that's anecdotal. But look at how selective they are about which hard data that they are willing to publicize. You know, they frame the narrative. And I think it's the same in the birth experience because, you know, you referenced the abysmal outcomes that we have for the birth experiences, much of which can't be quantified because you're talking about, again, the rewiring of the limbic brain through that limbic imprint at birth and the deleterious consequences it has for human beings to develop into functioning human beings as they grow. And that's hard to even measure or describe in a very like clear, precise way. But then, you know, there's lots of statistics and information out there that health outcomes, especially the United States amongst the developed world, is very, it's like, it's pretty embarrassing, but it's not often talked about much. But then, you know, they'll dismiss any anecdotes.
Coach Bam?
Yeah.
But they cherry pick their data.
Go ahead, Ayla. Do you have something to say?
Ayla,
No, just agree.
we wrapping it up. What any final comments before me and Bam, as the hostess with the mostesses, finish up? Any final comments?
No, I'm so grateful to have had this conversation with you guys, and yeah, just thank you for having me on.
Yeah,
You're
Coach Bam.
Yeah, I just I want to say that I hope this conversation continues. I hope we can meet you in person. So when you're ready, let's talk. We'll get you.
Yeah, we'd like to invite you to our lab weekend just to be on a fly on the wall. And if you like it, you can sign up to be a coach. Here's what I'll say. You are a Goata coach. You are a human being who knows that the natural way is the only way, and that everything we do, anything we do to sever that is really a you've said it a number of times, right? It's archaic. It's a violation of our rights as human beings. You know, one thing that makes me a pissed off old guy, old healer, is that I had 3 degenerative disc at age 29, and my son was 3 years old, and all he wanted to do was wrestle with his father, and I couldn't do it. And you know, I used to cry myself to sleep. So, but keep doing what you're doing. If you need anything from us, go to home office, a donation, or anything to spread the love of a natural birth and the way you guys do it. And just reach out. We'd love to have you as a guest to either CERT weekend or anything. And what we always say is keep your inside ankle bones high, your heels away all day, your feet straight, and make sure your butt's in the back chain. All the love, Ayla.
Wait, before we get off, can you just do a little plug for us? If you got a website, where can people?
Oh, a plug for yourself. A plug for yourself.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, you can go to my website, eylacuenca.com. I have an Instagram, eylacuencabirth. I also have a Telegram channel, and that's all uncensored sex, conception, birth, red pill stuff, so it doesn't get taken down by Instagram. So you can find me on any one of those platforms, and I work virtually, in person, people all over the world. So whatever you need, if you're just curious, I'm here.
Yay!
Nice.
Great.
I told Bam we need the F-bomb channel.
Yeah, we need a Telegram. The Goata really needs a Telegram.
The F-bomb channel.
There's too much going on.
Off-color content.
Cut us off left and right. All right, guys, we're out.
Thanks,
Bye,
Ayla.
Ayla.
Incredible conversation.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Bye.